You're listening to Torpedo Fish Radio, crossing the great divide between one mind and another. I'm Maddie Groves, and this is episode number 2. My guest on this episode is Emmy Award-winning voice actor Jim Ward, who won a 2009 Daytime Emmy for voicing Imor the Crusher on the cartoon Biker Mice from Mars. I first heard Jim on the Stephanie Miller radio show, which is a really hilarious political talk show that mixes serious commentary with political satire. On the show, Jim does the voices for everyone from George W. Bush to Rush Limbaugh, William Shatner, Pat Robertson, and even Kim Jong-il. Here's a clip of Jim on the Stephanie Miller Show.
In a move sure to provide fodder for conspiracy theorists, the Clinton Library withheld emails with subject lines like X-Files and Area 51 from a batch of documents recently released at a UFO buff's request. National Archives officials made several files, ranging from a White House staffer's obsession with the TV show X-Files to President Bush's push to hook up the Sci-Fi Channel at Camp David.
Oh, God.
All right, we have Bill Clinton had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, we're finally going to release the reports on our contacts with UFOs. I do this because we can learn much from our wise and ancient neighbors in space. For instance, the ability to traverse unimaginable distances in a nanosecond. The ability to harness the basic forces of the universe for peaceful purposes. And as the recipient of their masterful diplomatic skills, I'm here to tell you, doggies, I tell you what, there are planets out there with 5 different sexes. Think about it. When they send a diplomatic mission, missionary is the last thing in their mind. You haven't had a summit meeting till you've had a Saturnian 6-way. I've experienced Venusian Vajayjay, Neptunian Nookie, and Plutonian Poontang, all in the name of interplanetary harmony, of course. Now that I'm ambassador without portfolio, I'm looking forward to the delegation from Rigel 7. I hear Ambassador Heather. Her real name's unpronounceable without 2 tongues. More on that later. But I hear she has 8 breasts, and every one of them real. Now that's what I call the final frontier, going where no man has gone before. That's right, as far as Earthmen are concerned, they're all virgins. Oh, hell. Hey, I'm wearing my protective force field. I didn't feel that at all. Yeah, that last one got through a little bit. Beam me up, Heather.
Believe it or not, there's some people who might not know what the Stephanie Miller Show is. We actually don't have it in Washington, D.C. anymore.
I know,
It was like the day after the election, they took it off.
Coincidence?
I don't think
not.
So.
No, yeah.
Can you just say a little bit about what...
Well, Stephanie Miller, first of all, is the daughter of Bill Miller, Goldwater's running mate. She's a stand-up comedian, primarily. She's also hosted game shows and... had a brief acting career, possibly even more brief than mine. So, yeah. But she's been in radio for some time now. And this current show has been on the air since 2004.
Oh, okay. And when you say current, do you mean there's been a little bit of a checkered past, right, with the radio show?
Yeah. She was on KFI and KEBC in the 90s before that. And she also did, I think, top 40 radio in Chicago. She does air checks from that periodically, and they're pretty hilarious. But actually, I was with her in one of the previous incarnations at KABC in the late 90s. Friend Carlos Alizraki, formerly the Taco Bell Chihuahua, and Officer Garcia on the Vegas show, the cop thing. I can't remember the name now. Reno 911. Okay, good. I knew it was some. It's one of 2 cities in Nevada. I could have picked the wrong one.
That in Winnemucca, right?
Yeah. We had the same agent, and he was doing voices for her. That time it was a nighttime show, 7 to 10. And they'd come in the afternoon and ad-lib bits and record them and then play them later during the show. He was getting awfully busy with various things. He's also a stand-up comedian. He's on the road all the time. Right. So he brought me in to cover for him, and I ended up working more with Stephanie on that show than he did, ultimately.
Oh, wow. So is that how you and Stephanie started working together? Wow.
And then we did some ill-advised bits, which got us thrown off the air. Well, it was a lot of things, but that was...
Yeah. What was the
Oh,
ill-advised?
the worst one was called Jesus Christ Super Stud. And just the title itself should have got us thrown off the air. But it's even worse than that.
So was that, were you, I mean, I've heard you all talk about that on the show. Was that something that came as a total surprise being?
I don't think so. I think things were getting pretty bad. Remember the Howard Stern movie? And Paul Giamatti played his boss. They called him Pig Vomit.
Okay.
That's what she called her boss at the radio show. Oops, hope he's not listening.
Now, was it a political difference at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was no liberal radio in those days.
Right.
The right-wingers had pretty much claimed AM radio, especially AM, since Paul Harvey and people like that.
Right.
I didn't know why. I guess they figured Hollywood was full of liberal commie pinkos, and the only way they could reach their people was through AM radio. But they've been very, very successful at it. And they have obviously FM stations too now. But.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to talk about that because when you drive through what Rush Limbaugh calls flyover country, the only thing really to listen to on the radio is right-wing political talk. I mean,
and gospel.
Yeah, and I had
country.
sort of my standards. Like, I'll listen to preachers, but I won't listen to sports radio. I think there's nothing more boring. But I remember thinking, like, driving through, I could see that Dr. Laura has chops, and so does Rush.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking, why does the left have to be so depressing? And, I mean, I do love Amy Goodman very deeply, but
she's great. But
she's not funny. She's not a barrel of laughs.
No.
And and I had just been thinking, why don't we step up? And then Air America came around, and I'll never forget the first time I heard it. I was, I think it was probably in either 2005. It was before the 2006 elections, and I was coming back from my therapist in the car. I was driving around DuPont Circle, and I heard this show, and I thought, how could these guys be so brave? And that was my first thought, because you were openly talking about the president in the most disrespectful terms.
Charge to put food on your family.
I know, but since then, it's it doesn't seem that dangerous right now. But that's kind of where we were back then, which is that people were afraid. To say things.
Exactly.
And that was my first thought. I was like, I can't believe this show. And I was instantly addicted because I was terrified at the time I was terrified we were going to go to war with Iran. I was, and so, it's really, I know that you guys probably hear from a lot of listeners talking about, how the show has changed their life, saved their life, but that's real.
Well, yeah, especially in 2004 after the Kerry debacle.
Yeah.
We were on in Columbus, one of our first major stations, and obviously they were very depressed because, true to his promise, Wally Odell, head of Diebold, took the election for George W. Bush. I mean, he was out in the open saying he was going to help him win the election, and he sure did, because the suddenly exit polls, which we relied on consistently to show who people just voted for, and it was always assumed they had no reason to lie about who they just voted for. Suddenly, the exit polls were skewing just the opposite of the poll results.
Right.
And so, in response to that, we don't do exit polls anymore. It's not that the
is
votes
that
were,
true?
not anywhere to the extent that they used to. I don't think I've ever heard of exit polls since 2004. But it's very clear if you look. Harvey Wasserman and Bob Vitrakis in Ohio have done a lot of work on that, showing how the vote was hacked and how in some cases it was just blatantly so. Where Kerry was leading 60-40, it went exactly the other way, just as an example. Or some obscure candidate would trounce Kerry, therefore obviously leaving more votes for Bush. But it was incredibly blatant. So we were really performing therapy on people in Ohio. I think we literally prevented some suicides because that was very, very depressing.
Yeah.
And which made it all the more fun when, during the last election, Karl Rove was pontificating, saying, well, McCain's got to take Ohio. If he doesn't take Ohio, and then Britt Hume jumped as, Barack Obama's just taking Ohio. Just the look on Rove's face. Looked like he'd pooped his pants.
So, what was the name of the two authors? Is Harvey Wasserman?
Harvey Wasserman and Bob Fitrakis, Fitrakis. You can find them online. Oh, I wish I had more information on them. But just Google them and you'll find all sorts of things about computer voting and all that. And all that came in, of course, as a result of the Florida debacle with the Chads and whatnot. So along came the Help America Vote Act, or as I call it, the Help America Vote Republican Act,
right,
where they brought in all these privately owned computer firms, computer companies with privately held software. Can't remember the technical term for that. So you could not, it would be a violation to look into the workings of the computer program by which they selected the candidates. Proprietary. That's what I'm not worried.
Right. I remember this.
And no one is bothered by this, that you're not allowed to see into the workings of how the votes are counted. And it turns out they're easily hacked into. In Ohio, there were reports of people coming in after the votes were counted, coming in and messing around with the machines to make sure the vote came out the right way, according to the companies that own the vote counting technology. One of the guys who was instrumental in putting that together was this guy named Mike Connell, who died in a mysterious plane crash a couple of years ago, I think it was. And he knew where all the bodies were buried. Well, shouldn't have put it that way, but he knew exactly how it was done, and suddenly he wasn't available to talk to anymore.
I think one reason why people don't care is because they don't understand it. It's kind of complicated.
And also people want very much to believe in their country, and they don't want to believe that this sort of thing can happen.
So have you guys on the show, are you ever afraid of, if not, official sources coming after you or just crazy people?
Well, Stephanie has had some stalkers. That just comes with the territory when you're doing this sort of thing.
I remember Sock. Yes. I was pretty impressed by that, actually.
Yeah, and she called him up.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit, about what happened with Sock.
Well, it turns out he lives with his mom. What a surprise.
But it started she appeared on Sean Hannity, right?
I think that's what it was. I think, yeah. And so she got death threats from this guy. Wanted to stick an AK-47 up her glory hole, I think were his words. Right. First of all, what kind of American are you using a commie gun to murder liberals or to threaten to? But that's the problem. I know supposedly the Second Amendment offers us, it gives us the right to own firearms as part of a well-regulated militia, but they don't like to talk about that part.
So Sock was whether or not he has an AK-47 or not.
Well, he
sent her a note.
A little unbalanced, yeah. Right. And occasionally she gets these crazy letters with lots of writing on the outside of the envelope as well as inside.
I've seen. Yeah. So what does she do?
Well, you contact the authorities if it seems like a serious threat. But
did she do that first?
But first you mock them on the air.
But she didn't just mock him on the air. She called him up at home.
Yeah.
And whose idea was that?
That was hers.
Did she come up with that right at during the show? Hey, I'm going to call him.
Yeah. He left his phone number, so why not?
And were you surprised that she did that? Were you there at the time?
Yeah.
Were you shocked, or did you?
Well, not really, because she's kind of impulsive sometimes, and that actually was quite good for the show. It was an exclusive with a stalker.
And the guy gets on, and he really sounded like a dweeb.
Yeah, just one of those people that never leaves the house.
But, I think that's something that I really have come to really love about the show, is that you guys really engage people and you talk to them. I mean, she just called him up like, what were you thinking?
Right.
Like, I thought it was really a really human
First
moment.
of all, I've got your address and your phone number here. I know the FBI's phone number too. You know what? Really?
Yeah. But I mean, I think it took him.
This is a game?
He was taken aback a little.
Yeah.
And he really didn't sound so big and bad and dangerous.
No. He just, that's the problem with the right-wing media, is that they embolden people. They inflame them, get them enraged about sometimes nothing at all, like the supposed death panels in the Obama healthcare bill, which of course do not exist.
Right.
What they're referring to is something proposed by a Republican, actually. Since doctors are already giving end-of-life counseling, they might as well get paid for it. And that's all it is. It's not that they're selecting people to be killed.
Right.
It's not Soylent Green or anything like that.
Well, that's another thing they're better at. I remember, like, occasionally as a, person who does some activism, I've tried to be my own Frank Luntz, and I can't do it. I can't make myself call, legislation about impeachment, the American Freedom Act of, what I mean? It's just not part of our makeup. Right. Now that incident with Salk, that sounded, and it seems like it was pretty spontaneous. Your show, now it sounds, I know there's more preparation, behind the scenes. You guys make it seem so spontaneous.
Well, she does a lot of show prep. She really does her homework, with people she's going to interview.
Right.
And, themes of the day that everyone else is talking about, and we can put our own spin on. Every once in a while, I'll pull something out. She'll give me a story and say, what can you do with this? And I'll scribble on a piece of scrap paper and come up. Yeah. Some of them are easy. Tom Brokaw just come up with something, else in it.
Right.
Well, I'm from Slovenia.
Well, as I was trying to, giving a little bit of my aim with this podcast is to ask some of the stupid questions. And, one question that I've always had is, how do you write a joke or write a comedy bit? Everyone does it in their daily life, but when you're under you have to come up with a joke. How do you do that?
Well,
what's your process?
As I said, Chris actually would send me these news items. Chris Lavoie, our producer.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And sidekick, the three of us are in the room together with God knows how many other people. I'm wandering in. But he'll send me these news stories, and I would try to find a hook, something that would, make it pop. There's something about John McCain and Joe Lieberman. It evolved into them, having a little bit of the love that dare not speak its name, because it seemed like they were so close together that we were playing on the idea that they were boyfriends, which is
I love that bit.
Joe Lieberman is very fun to do because he's got this sort of strangled sort of voice that goes through his nose, and as if he never stops to breathe. He just keeps going on. And he reminds me of Max Wright from Alf. So we'd work that in sometimes.
Oh, right.
Remember that?
I don't remember that, but if I ever saw Alf,
Alf, you can't eat the cat. Just don't. But
if I ever see Alf, I'm going to say, that's Joe Lieberman.
yeah, Max Wright.
So is it as fun as it sounds?
Yeah, it is fun.
Sounds so...
Yeah, when it's clicking, and, it is a blast.
So, that one of my favorite characters that you do, if not is Kim Jong-il. How did that come about?
I feel bad about that one because it's kind of racist, because it assumes that all people from Eastern Asia sound the same, which of course is not remotely true.
Right.
But I worked on a nasty little website back in the 90s called icebox.com, which you can still find somewhere on the web. I played President Lincoln in Hard Drinking Lincoln, where they made him out just to be an old drunk. I said, come on, you old whore, lighten up, you old whore. And he throws up in his hat. And Scrapple, when did I eat Scrapple? It's really obnoxious stuff. And one of the shows on there was making fun of him getting shot in the head, which is the least funny thing you can imagine. But somehow they made it funny. But one time, Frederick Douglass, played by Kevin Michael Richardson, another guy I work with all the time in cartoons, walks in the door and he turns her, "Oh, a Negro! Oh, it's just you, Fred." It's just really irreverent, crazy stuff like that. But one of the other shows on Icebox, which I wasn't on, was Mr. Wong, and this bitter old Chinese manservant who had this very hoity-toity sort of woman who was his boss. Say cotillion. I'll give you $1 if you say cotillion. Cotillion! So, it's just, again, really nasty stuff. I mean, somehow he hated Elvis Presley because he's a big Bing Crosby fan. He ends up urinating on Elvis's grave at one point. It's Elvis, Aaron Presley. So I based Kim Jong-il somewhat on that, a little bit on Martin Yan from PBS, Yan Ken Cook.
Oh, okay.
And it was an authentic
Right.
Chinese accent. But well, of course, Kim Jong-il's Korean. But anyway, but yeah, of course, Kim Jong-il doesn't sound anything like that. But it's just fun having him getting into debates with Bill Clinton.
Right.
Bill Clinton. So I look at it the same way I look at doing Tom Brokaw and his inability to pronounce a letter L.
Uh-huh. Well, was it a particular, did you develop Kim Jong-il for the Stephanie Miller Show, or had you already?
No, it just came up, and I don't remember the first time I did it, but I just that voice just came out, and and it stuck, and I made him. Because there were so many weird things about Kim Jong-il, the things that he liked, most of which we made up. But
AMC
some
Pacer.
of them,
How did that just pop out?
Yeah,
and
pop my head,
Zagnut?
and Zagnut and AMC. I want to treat out AMC Pacer.
These are his demands.
Right. For Kim Jong-il.
This is going to be my real kinky angle.
Rinzi Rohan, especially when she's a lesbian.
It's just anything excuse to find an L.
And what's that music? You play this music that sounds...
just some random Chinese music that Chris found.
Right.
Which, they use.
And do people complain about it?
I've had some people who are a little upset about it, but not excessively so, because they probably, I think they're laughing even while they're saying, "Damn you, Jim Ward."
Because it's so, to me, and it's the same thing when you do like a gay voice. It's so over the top that it's obviously
yes.
And there is something.
But I usually do that for people who are deeply closeted,
right?
Who are usually the ones yelling the loudest about the gay agenda,
exactly.
Which is this crazy idea that maybe they should be treated like everyone else. Which, wow, where do they get that?
Oh, my favorite one is the Jim Dobson.
James Dobson. He actually sounds like that.
I know.
Have you heard James Dobson talk? And he had something on his website where he, this is how you teach your boys not to be gay. You roughhouse with them and you teach them to pound square pegs into round holes, and you shower with them and show them your penis.
And
that was actually on the website.
That.
Yeah. It's like, wow, huh?
I think
what?
That really, to me, that has to have contributed to. He's not where he was before.
No.
Are they even a going concern?
Oh yeah, they're still around, and not everyone in groups like that are that odious. They just have certain conventional beliefs, and I'm sure they're very nice people.
But they often do sound really gay.
Well, if the shoe fits,
And I love the disco music. Oh my God! And do you only pull that out for Geraldo?
Oh, that's right.
And he's got that mustache. Come on.
Yeah,
it's a gay
70s porn, gay porn mustache, yeah.
Wow.
And he also has a bit of a Sibilant S. You might have noticed that he
does. But for some reason, it's not offensive. I'm gay, and I'm not offended at all. It's just, it's affectionate.
There are plenty of people with Sibilant S's who aren't gay, too. Who am I thinking of? Well, James Mason, of course. They're the same thing. I'm sorry, Joe. You must abide by what is written. Yeah.
Wow. So who was the first person that you did an impression of that everybody recognized right away, like a public?
Wow.
How old were you? Were you like 7? Or?
Wow, it's going back. I can't really remember who my first impression was.
Or who was your first non-famous person? Sister so-and-so?
Well, actually, when I was in high school, I was doing the morning announcements.
Over the PA?
Kind of my, almost like my first radio job. Uh-huh. And so occasionally I would do my biology professor, Mr. Fobb, during the morning announcements. This was after I graduated biology, of course. But,
right.
But he had one of these strange, constricted voices. He was a very odd man, and he would drone on and on and on and on, and telling us about Gregor Mendel and his peas, and the plane would fly overhead, and he'd suddenly shout, "Noise pollution!" and go on as if nothing had happened.
And one time there's a guy in the back row who's holding hands with his girlfriend.
And is going on about messenger RNA. Get your damn hands off her! And went on back as if...
So did you do this sort of like, obviously not identifying yourself as Mr. Fobb, but everyone knew? Or did you?
Yes. Yeah, I it's Mr. Fobb with the morning announcements.
Wow.
And apparently someone who was taking biology at the time said, "Get that damn idiot off there!"
Wow. And where were you? Where was this when you were in high school? What part of the country was this?
Oh, it's actually right over in the valley, here in L.A. I'm actually 2 blocks from my old high school. The house.
You're what?
I bought a house that's about 2 blocks from my old high school.
Wow. So were you have you always been politically astute, and or was this a function of working with Stephanie? Or
well, of course, growing up in the '60s and the civil rights era and the assassinations and whatnot, and my mother was a Republican, and my dad still is. She doesn't vote Republican anymore. She hasn't voted with him for decades. But and my dad was a Democrat. I'm from a working class background and became a professor, intellectual. So
your dad,
he was obviously on the other side, yeah. And but my mom was never ever really hard right or anything like that. So he had some influence on me as well. But and I became fascinated with the Kennedys.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. How did that happen? Was that did that start at the time?
He was actually the first president. I was born towards the end of the Eisenhower administration, but he was the first president that I remember. There's a guy in the suit on TV talking about serious stuff, and with the Irish background and everything, we felt kind of a kinship with them, even though obviously not remotely from that
echelon.
Kind of, yes, society. But remember my cousins and I on my father's side playing touch football on the banks of the Russian River. So we were felt like low rent Kennedys, So I felt. Plus, I had a crush on Jackie. Well, first I had
Jackie, not Caroline.
I had a crush on Caroline.
Okay,
and then as I got older, 8, I went for
first MILF.
So yes, exactly. And I was very disappointed when she married Onassis like everyone else. Yeah.
So when he was assassinated, how old were you?
4.5.
Wow.
Actually. And Caroline was just a bit older than I was, so she was technically an older woman then too. But and that was the first contact with death that had never occurred to me before. And my dad was talking to me about it and said that, well, everybody dies. And I thought, I hadn't thought about that before. And I flashed back on that when my own father died 6 years ago, around the same time we started the radio show, actually. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But just I think growing up in the 60s had a big influence on my political leanings and just having an affinity for, and just felt right, with especially when Bobby was shot and with Martin Luther King before that, and I just got this notion that, well, I think I've been depressed ever since. The bad guys always win, and the world is a horrible place.
But you still show up.
Yes, I still show up. I always hope for the best.
And I think part of what you guys are doing that is really helpful is that as liberals, let's face it, we are more depressed because we think.
Right.
But we do. If I didn't have Stephanie Miller's show, I would give up, possibly. And even it's kind of like, remember after 9/11, The Onion came out with that brilliant cover. It was like a picture of, it was just enough, the tragedy plus time equation was just on the side of,
right.
Maybe, I probably thought there hadn't been enough time, but they had that image of the United States with a bullseye, and it just said, holy fucking shit. Do you remember that?
Yes, that's right.
And that was so, I felt, I don't know, that was so healing, really.
Right.
Because you have to laugh. You have to. Yeah.
Well, if you've listened to the show, you know what I feel about 9/11.
I know, and I kind of agree with you.
It's
actually.
our.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because not everyone might know how you feel or what's at stake. Or
you have to be careful not to speculate too much into all the details of it, because, well, people just flip out. They said that Stephanie is one of them. It's just, no, that's impossible. That's ridiculous. That couldn't possibly ever happen.
Do you think she really believes that? That it couldn't possibly happen?
Oh, no, but she believes, obviously, the official story. But
is this the Republican in her?
Probably. But also, just a lot of people are very reluctant to think that our government could be that devious to let that happen, or worse, be involved in making it happen.
But, it's not the first time.
Yeah.
False flag operations have been going on as long as there have been wars. And I would often point out Operation Northwoods, which the Joint Chiefs were trying to push on Kennedy, where they were actually suggesting that they would load people onto, ostensibly students who are really CIA agents, onto a plane. This is the plan. Fly them out over the Caribbean, then have it meet up with another drone plane. So they merge into one blip. The one with the people on it goes and lands in the Dominican Republic or somewhere. The other one, the drone plane, continues on into Cuban airspace that sends out a bogus mayday saying that we're being attacked by Cuban fighters. Then the plane is remotely blown up. And another part of the plan, and they blame it on Castro, obviously. Another part of the plan is to blow up a couple of buildings in Miami.
Oh, that
blame
was
it
part
on
of
Castro.
Operation Northwood?
That sounds awfully familiar.
Yeah.
A couple of buildings falling down suddenly.
And the idea was to get people, the public,
Riled
behind
up,
an idea.
going after Castro.
Right.
And they were always trying this. I mean, Kennedy took responsibility for the Bay of Pigs because, in the sense that Harry Truman, the buck stops here. But the thing was planned during the Eisenhower administration by Allen Dulles and Richard Bissell, largely. And the whole thing was that they were tricking Kennedy into thinking it was going to be an indigenous Cubans doing it for themselves, to misquote Annie Lennox. But the whole thing was the Bay of Pigs operation was clearly meant to fail. And I say that because it's recently come out that Allen Dulles was warned that the Bay of Pigs people had been infiltrated by Castro's men. Castro knew exactly when and where it was going to happen. The Bay of Pigs was a swamp, an alligator-infested swamp. Castro had the high ground. He could take pot shots at them all day long. And the idea was that once it did start to fail, that the U.S. would then launch a massive strike against Cuba. In fact, they were waiting just over the horizon.
Okay, got it.
And they informed Kennedy at the last minute, this is what's going to happen. You're going to order and he told them to go to hell, essentially.
So it really wasn't supposed to be a covert operation all along? It was supposed to
It was meant to
morph
be...
into an overt operation?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Pearl Harbor.
Did they think we were really going to care about these supposed rebels enough to go to war with Cuba?
Well, that was... You need to know something about the Joint Chiefs. Then they were extreme. There's some extreme right wingers there.
So they were like
Curtis LeMay.
They were like the Dr. Strange.
Exactly. In fact, in Dr. Strange, were Buck Turgidson. It's talking about, Mr. President, I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed. I am saying 10 to 20 million dead tops, depending on the breaks. Well, that was essentially what Curtis LeMay was saying. It's like, yeah, we're going to have a first nuclear strike on the Soviet Union. We'll probably lose 4 or 5 cities, but we'll win.
Right.
So it'll be worth it. 4 or 5 cities? How many millions of people dead? To say nothing of the radiation.
And from what I understand, all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff signed off on Operation Northwoods, and Kennedy himself put the kibosh on it. That's from what I've heard, that's what happened. Well, my history with 9/11 Truth is I started off. I had a friend of mine. I got together with 2 other people in my community, and we did some impeachment activism for Bush, obviously, against Bush and Cheney. And when we first met with people, I told her she was a truther. She is still, and I said, under no circumstances, we're not going to talk about 9/11 because people will say we're crazy.
Oh yeah, they flip out.
And I told her, just please do not talk about it. We're only going to talk about impeachment because I don't want to link the two. And she couldn't help herself.
Right.
But we got together. It was like one of these meetup.com. And she started talking about it, and I started listening to her. I thought, oh, my God, you know what? She's got a point. And the more she talked about it, the more I thought, I don't know what happened, but we definitely haven't heard the real story.
Well, the real story is out there, but you can't say it on the national media because, I talk to people about that, and friends of mine are more heavily into it than I am, and you can see the terror in their eyes. And say, no, that can't be. Shut up. Stop telling me that. I don't want to hear about it.
I mean, people who believe the official story.
And it's just too horrifying for them to even contemplate.
Right.
And one thing, and I can understand why people can't buy that the hijackers are still alive and the planes were flown by remote control and the buildings were brought down by controlled demolition, which they clearly were, because there's no way buildings fall like that except by controlled demolition. It's never happened, never will happen except that way. And I'm keep waiting for someone to show me some film of a building that collapsed that way without it being controlled demolition. Anyway, be that as it may, the thing that you can get a little more agreement on is the one question that people on both sides can ask is, what happened to the Air Force?
The what? Why weren't they mustered or scrambled or whatever?
When they talk about Payne Stewart, remember
Payne Stewart,
the golfer, when he was his private jet.
Oh, right. Uh-huh.
There had decompression and they were on autopilot and they all died. There were F-16s escorting the plane all the way across the country until it crashed in, I think it was South Dakota. And somehow on that day, the Air Force couldn't find its butt with both hands. But part of the reason was that they were being distracted by an exercise simulating planes crashing into buildings.
Like
there's an
the
actual
North
recording
Pole or something like that, right? In Alaska.
All over the place, really. So that the Air Force is distracted by a phony attack, and so they missed the real one. But part of it is too is a lot of planes were scrambled, and they were directed to circle over the water, and not to go into New York airspace. And by whom and to what end? One wonders. And also something odd happened in April of 2001, soon as after they got in. Rumsfeld, I don't remember the exact details of it, issued an order. He changed the protocol.
Right.
Because initially it was if a plane goes off doesn't go off the radar. The blip is, that's what people don't understand. If the transponder goes off, there's still a blip. A 757 doesn't become a stealth fighter because the transponder is off. It just means information like altitude and speed and the destination aren't coming up anymore. But in the past, when something like that happened, the planes were immediately scrambled and immediately intercepted, and they needed presidential authorization to shoot down, obviously. And Rumsfeld changed it so that you needed direct intervention by the executive branch, and which he included himself, obviously, to even intercept the planes, which is brand new. And so that's something that needs investigation. Oh, and they rescinded that in October, I believe.
Oh,
no,
wow.
I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe it's October or November of 2001. I guess it'd be suspicious if it had been on September 12th that they did that. So there's a lot of stuff that
and you don't have
remains
to.
hidden.
I think one of the rhetorical acts of trickery that people who are debunkers employ is that just because you question one aspect of it doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
Like, for example, I don't know anything about controlled demolitions. I didn't know anything about them before 9/11. That to me, that's not the most damning aspect of it, in my opinion. It's more the kind of stuff you're just talking about these weird executive orders, giving. But the bottom line is, why did Bush have to go into I don't know what the. When he and Cheney went in together to be questioned by the 9/11 Commission.
Right. Yes, they wouldn't. He wouldn't allow reporters to ask any questions, record anything, write anything down, and they weren't under oath.
Yeah. Why? And to me, the most I've seen all the movies. The one that's sorry, I keep bumping into this thing.
Yes.
The movie that I found the most compelling was just. Press for Truth, because it just asked questions. It was about these 9/11 widows who they just wanted an investigation, and they went into it assuming that the government was going to want to know what happened also. And at every turn, they were stymied.
Yes,
and it doesn't really make any accusations. It just asks questions.
Right.
And,
one of the big lies about 9/11 was from Condoleezza Rice. No one could imagine that planes would be flying. You didn't have to imagine it. I mean, the G8 summit was held in Italy, I think in March of 2001. They had surface-to-air missiles all around the place because they believed the intelligence that Al-Qaeda was planning to use airplanes as weapons.
Yeah, so what did they?
So it shouldn't have come as any surprise, especially since the World Trade Center was attacked in 1993,
right?
That even assuming that it was Al-Qaeda flying planes into buildings, it shouldn't have come as a surprise to anyone that they're going to try to hit the World Trade Center again.
Yeah. So going back to the Stephanie Miller show, how did you transition from being an opposition voice to, obviously...
Oh, right. Once
what is
Obama...
that like? Is that a challenge,
Right. Well, yeah, we've...
Is it more
what are we
fun
going to
to
talk about now that we have...
Yeah, so what do you talk about? I mean, I know what you talk about, but how did you meet about this and talk about what you're going to do? Or
I sure miss George Bush for comedy purposes, though. That was just a gold mine. Obama, just not funny.
He's not that funny. So what do you
I mean,
do?
he is sometimes, but, the Republicans are still providing plenty of fodder. Probably, John Boner, as we call him, is a lot of fun. We've had several quotes of his where he's just really histrionic and he starts crying on the drop of a hat.
It's pretty funny.
And he's rumored to spend a lot of time at happy hour.
Yeah,
Once 5 o'clock rolls around, he's at the bars.
That's what they say. But I mean, it's like, it's always more romantic to be the underdog.
Right.
Like in Casablanca or something. So now, it's a little bit more...
well, yeah, we have some contention on that because Stephanie admits to being an Obama apologist, or admits at least to being accused of being an Obama apologist. Right. But there are a lot of things about the Obama administration. Now, I realize he's thinking ahead, and he is, that's just his nature to work with people from the other side.
It is.
And try to find, common ground on things. But these people don't want to play.
They don't.
I mean, it's...
Are you shocked?
It's so obvious now that they're... No.
Doesn't
surprise me after the whole Clinton debacle.
Does it seem worse than
it's definitely worse.
It seems like it.
Yeah. It just, with especially the blatant hypocrisy of talking about the stimulus as if it were some sort of communist takeover, and then taking the money from the stimulus and bragging about it, holding the big check, like Publishers Clearinghouse thing, telling their constituents, look what I did for you, having tried to shoot down the entire stimulus.
Well, this is one of the... I'm starting to have mixed feelings about right-wing world, and I'll just say a little bit about what that is for people who have never heard the show. And incidentally, if you want to hear the show, you can hear it online at stephaniemiller.com. And I don't know how much the podcast costs. I've been paying for it for so long.
$4.95 if you... I don't remember
whatever
exactly.
it is, it's like
but
not
it's cheap.
that much.
It's dirt cheap, yeah.
It's definitely worth it. And you can also go on one of the affiliates and listen live. But anyway, one of the staples of the show is every day. I guess your producer, Chris Lavoie, spends a lot of time watching Fox News. And he takes the...
He says, I wish I could watch Rachel and Oberman, but he's too busy getting sound clips from Fox.
He takes Fox News clips, and you guys play them, and sometimes you don't even have to refute them or
they're
comment
just
on them.
so ridiculous
stupid.
by themselves. Yeah.
But I swear, I get uptight. Sometimes I have to turn it off because my blood pressure is going off. I would never hear those things if I didn't listen to you guys. And sometimes I think, God, I wish you wouldn't play them. You know what I mean? Because you're... What do you think about that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Catapult the propaganda, as Bush used to say.
Have you ever talked about the pros and cons, or is that just...
Well, but we do spend a lot of time tearing apart what they just said and raking them over the coals. But yeah, it is a little uncomfortable having to carry their water for them and get them to an audience that otherwise wouldn't hear it. But people have to hear it. They have to know the kind of propaganda that is being... they really run a brilliant operation.
They do.
People like Carl Rove and Frank Luntz. I mean, it's psyops. It's a very sophisticated operation.
It's totally.
Getting people to short circuit their brains and go directly to the R complex, the reptilian part of the brain.
Is that what that's called?
Yes, that responds to fear. And Goering understood this perfectly well. He said that you get people afraid, they'll do whatever you want.
The tough thing is whereas on one hand, everybody does kind of glaze over when you start talking about Hitler analogies, but it's, they really, especially Glenn Beck, I think that some of the rhetoric that he uses is so terrifying. And I've been trying to find out how there's, the First Amendment isn't absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie house. Isn't that what he's doing?
That's exactly what he's doing.
And
he's inflaming people. He's look at Sharon Engel talking about Second Amendment solutions if you don't like the way an election comes out.
Or even, couldn't we all, I feel like when those guys get on, especially Fox News, because people look at that and they see a person in a tie in front of behind a desk with with graphics, it looks like a
right. He's got a chalkboard, and he draws arrows between pictures, so he must be smart.
Well, him, and also just even other people, not just Glenn, because he is a little bit theatrical, and people by now know that he's very
he's
but it's more like
he admits to being a rodeo clown,
right?
And who knows what he really believes?
But in addition to things like the way he inflames people, what also I feel shouldn't be covered by the First Amendment is when they do things like the death panels, when they say things that are untrue,
right?
And people go out and vote based on that. Isn't that infringing on my rights? Going out and spreading lies that, you know what I mean?
The problem is, again, Fox is very clever. They've carved out a niche. They have their audience who don't listen to anyone else because they've been told that everything else is propaganda. The liberal media, the mainstream media, they're telling you lies, and the proof of that is there's a black man in the White House.
I guess
they don't come out and say it directly, but the implication is pretty clear that look what they did. There's this Kenyan foreign Muslim guy,
which I don't actually
claims he was born in Hawaii.
I don't personally
a foreign exotic place, which has been a state since 1959.
But it does sound foreign. And I don't actually think that I don't think Karl Rove is racist particularly, but they're not afraid they have no problem using that coyly kind of.
Sure. Lee Atwater apologized to Michael Dukakis after when he was dying of a brain tumor for the Willie Horton ad.
Wow.
So it's clear he didn't believe what he was spewing either, but it worked. And liberals are unfortunately play a part in that because Dukakis had this sort of lifeless professorial answer to that, saying, "Oh well, the American people are smarter." No, they're not. I mean, emotional appeals work, especially if people are in desperate times. They felt that they're being left behind, and it's these liberal elites supposedly that are leading them astray.
Well, you know what I would really like to see, and to some extent your show does this. I think we talked about this before. Is that you do engage people on the other side. I remember, not long ago, there was a really touching. A sad incident where one of your right-wing callers called up and
because his sister.
Yeah, were you there that day?
Yes.
Talk about what's some of the background to that? Is a guy you guys call right-wing Jerry, right?
Yeah, I think it was Jerry.
And what was the history like?
Well, we've been sort of playfully bickering for a long time. He would put up his little right-wing cat toys, and we try to bat him down.
What he called to apologize.
Oh, yeah.
To the show.
I guess because, his sister was gay and she had committed suicide. And I don't remember the exact incident he was calling, but...
Right. But he called in, he said, I've been a jerk or something like that. And she thought he was kidding at first, or she wasn't sure he was...
It's hard to tell sometimes if people are... yeah.
But I thought that was another, just like the sock thing... I thought that was one of those really profound moments because, she talked to him on a human level, and I don't even know if he has changed his other political views, but I guess he had been homophobic was one of the things. And so his sister, I believe she'd been in the military or something maybe, but she'd committed suicide and he was sorry for his sort of homophobic remarks in that case. It seems like one of the... I think this is something that I like Obama in this regard, is that... I don't know if it's going to work, but if you ever read any of his books, The Audacity of Hope, and also the Dreams from My Father, actually read, he operates under the assumption that, there's a lot of commonality in what people on either side want. And to some extent... the powers that be. And, I do not believe it's equally on the left and the right. I think the right does this more, but they use us in sort of a proxy war, and they maneuver the conversation into cultural issues.
Right.
It's so often not about, we don't talk about, maybe there is something about the healthcare legislation that we should all be concerned about operationally, but instead of talking about how it's going to work, it becomes all about this politics of resentment and especially, I think that the people who the right has done the most disservice to in some ways are the kind of like the working class white voters. They've tricked them into thinking that everybody on the left is a pointy-headed elitist. It's all about that. And when you guys talk to people,
imagine George Herbert Walker Bush accusing a liberal of being an elitist. That's the laugh. Yeah.
But when you actually talk to people and when people call the show and you let them talk and let them give their views, that kind of diffuses that, and sometimes sometimes on the parts of the show that kind of make me, if I could go in and say no, sometimes when Chris kind of like jumps in on people a lot of the time, maybe prematurely. Like sometimes I sit there and I think I want to hear more about what they say and why they think that, and just let them get it out. And you might be able to say, well, I can see your point about that. We all want, for a while there, we were made to feel like if we didn't want the war, we wanted to kill America, but.
Well, in some ways, there's just a language divide, which Frank Luntz understands really well.
Yeah.
Using the psyops, just using
brilliant,
shaded words to
to
make people feel a certain way, not so much think, but feel, and then the thoughts follow. And one of the issues where that really is the case, I think, is abortion, because it's the battle of the euphemisms in a way. You're either you feel there's a right to life or a right to privacy. It's not, we're talking about as if we're talking about two different things when it's really a medical procedure we're talking about, and the various ethical implications of that. And it's such a difficult thing to resolve, because you can't, you don't want to be insulting to people who believe that abortion is murder.
Right.
If they believe that, then yes, they should speak out against it, if that's one deeply held belief of yours. And on our side of the issue, there's the late term abortion thing, which, I'm sorry, is qualitatively different from the first trimester. I mean, in the first trimester, you basically got a polywog, which will someday, hopefully evolve into a human being. In the third trimester, you're looking at something different, and so, I can see their point on that end of things, but you have a constitutional right to it. It's a very thorny, difficult issue.
But what you're saying is, just because someone in good conscience doesn't feel comfortable terminating a life, even if it is a polywog, that doesn't mean they hate women or they. Right. Yeah.
It's that. Yes. I mean, that's again. Yeah. That's overstating the case. That obviously you want to keep women in their place. If you believe abortion is murder. No, it's not remotely true. For some people, maybe it is, and they're using that as a cover. But so there are some places where there's some overlap in some ways, and if you're not even using the same language to discuss the problem, there's just no way that's ever going to be resolved. And again, anything that's really emotional issue, trying to talk rationally about it, is going to offend everybody on some way if they have deeply ingrained feelings about it.
You know what? That makes me think of one way in which the Stephanie Miller Show and Jim Ward in particular have, in my opinion, kind of defused one of the best weapons that the right had in the culture war is that you're not prissy. I mean, you're squeezy McFeel pants.
Oh my. Come to Papa. Yeah.
I mean, you guys are, some of you eat meat and, well, I think that back in the 90s when I was driving through the heartland listening to Rush Limbaugh, he could be really funny when the way he made fun of liberals. And I remember he had this guy, I don't know if he still does it because I don't listen anymore, but he had his own sort of voice guy. I mean, this guy, I don't know that guy's name, who would do comedy bits. And the kinds of things that they poked fun of were, I remember there was one about like a non-competitive soccer league or something like that. There is kind of a legitimate critique to be made.
Yeah, we talked about the T-ball trophy. Everyone,
the T-ball trophy.
Yeah, if everyone's a winner, then no one is. Because,
right. And the kind of the humorless feminists and
what are you talking about? What's that supposed to mean? Yeah.
How many lesbian feminists does it take to change a light bulb?
Shut up.
Yeah, that's not funny.
That's not funny. Yes.
There was one bit that he has. It was really. It was a song, and it was into the tune of "In the Ghetto," and it was called "In a Yugo," and it was about a liberal couples driving around, something like a used car lot on the other side of town. A liberal couple's driving around in a Yugo. And, they've swerved to avoid hitting a rabbit and die. And I was like, okay, that's fair.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah,
and we, poke fun at liberals too.
But you guys aren't like that. You're like, you have a sense of humor. You're. You feel each other up, whatever. I mean, I believe that.
Well, she encourages me to grab her ass. I mean, she
agree
literally
with that.
does.
It's completely understand.
If I ever worked in a real company, I'd be toast because
And I think you should be
what?
fired.
Sexual harassment? What? What's that?
If you don't sexually harass
but she
her,
wanted
she
it.
should fire you.
Yeah, I know.
But,
exactly.
I think that even
she's very insecure. She wants reassurance there.
But I think that's one of the greatest weapons that you have, even if it's just your personalities, just showing that we're not a bunch of humorless, we're realistic. And I think where the right has kind of become what we used to be is, in the 80s, I think feminists were particularly guilty of this, is just, ideologically, it would be nice to fantasize that way, way, way back in our history, we were all matriarchal and sat in a circle, and we would still be peaceful if it weren't for, men. But that's not true.
There's Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir, Margaret Thatcher.
That's a fantasy.
Helen of Troy,
exactly.
Cleopatra.
But, the fantasy was that if we were all, equal, we were, you know what I mean? We'd all get along. But now that and our world would be at peace, blah, blah, blah. I happen to think that life is nasty, brutish, and short, and that you kind of need civilization to keep us from each other's throats. But but the right now, they have two religions. One is that the free market, if we just let the free market go, the hidden hand would in the background hum, gently in the background, and everything would be great. And then the other thing is God's going to come back. And even if he's going to destroy the world anyway, in the rapture, but they're doing what I think rightly.
So you might as well at least pretend to believe the things that'll get you to heaven. Right. Because God will be fooled by that.
But but what I think they've done is they've started to do what they kind of rightly accused us of doing back then. It's like adhering to these wishful, ideologies in the face of evidence.
Reality.
You can't let the market run rampant, because what they'll do is start charging usurious interest rates, and
because there's no one to stop them.
Yeah. So I think you guys are kind of like you're kind of, what do you call yourselves? South Park liberals?
Yes,
you're realistic.
That's right. And we make fun of Kim Jong-il. So South Park did it first. So there, that's my defense.
Who are your comedic heroes? Like, who did you grow up?
Wow,
admiring.
Well, by the time, I guess around my 14th birthday, my 13th or 14th, my parents got me a tape recorder. Mm-hmm. And around that time, there was a show on the air called Copycats. When they were, where all these guys like Frank Gorshin and Rich Little and George Kirby and all these guys doing impressions. And prior to that was David Fry I think he may have been on there too.
I kind of.
And everyone stole their William F. Buckley Jr. From David Fry. He was the first one to actually elucidate what William F. Buckley did, particularly with his tongue. So I kind of came into stand-up comedy through the back door, through making fun of or imitating people. So those guys I admired, and later came to appreciate like Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul and George Carlin. Of course, Carlin's one of my favorites. My dad liked him a lot too. That was
so you must have a Nixon. Everybody did Nixon.
Oh yeah,
right?
of
so
course.
let's hear your Nixon.
Richard Nixon. Let me say this about that. I'm not a crook. My wife, Pat. You have to get the jowls and the whole. And shock it to me.
Obviously people can't see you, but you are becoming.
Oh, you have to do the physicality of it. If you're doing Jimmy Stewart, you have to do the whole thing with the stooped sort of. He was very tall, you see, and he'd tend to bend over a little to bring himself down to your level, you see.
So do you actually plan these out, how you're going to, or does it just sort of pop out? Do you focus on, it's kind of like artists who draw caricatures, like they can't do the whole.
It's exactly, the same thing. You have to, Nicholson came to me once.
Nicholson?
Jack Nicholson, when I was in, in college. We were sitting around watching, what's his name? Who had the show after Saturday Night Live? Yeah, I can picture him, and I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, but we were there was some herbal let me say stimulants in the air, refreshments in the air, and I was sitting there, and your eyelids start to drop to half mast. His voice tends to go up into your nose, and my God, I'm doing Jack Nicholson. I just became Jack. That's where that comes from. I think he's been known to enjoy the green a bit himself. So, the physicality is really, really tied in with it. Like when I'm doing Bob Dole, I have to do the pin and the hand and the eyebrow.
I love your Bob Dole.
Yeah, Bob Dole. Bob Dole thinks Bob Dole should stop referring to Bob Dole in the third person. Bob Dole thinks make Bob Dole sound like a fruitcake. Bob Dole thinks Bob Dole ought to cut it out. But,
Now, what about when you have someone who has already been done by like Saturday Night Live? Do you have to take a different tack?
That's a good point. Well, everyone got their Reagan from Rich Little. I mean, Rich Little's become sort of a joke of late, because he doesn't really do political comedy. He's not a writer, but and his voices sort of started blend together. In fact, he's kind of disappeared. He's sort of become an amalgam of Reagan and Johnny Carson. I think his own voice has kind of disappeared.
That's interesting.
Well, he was the first one to point out that the head movements and the use of the word and Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, and the physicality of him. So that helps point you in the right direction. And doing an impression is different from doing a sound alike, when you have to drop in and match somebody.
Really?
Exactly.
Oh, how is it different?
Because if you're doing, for example, let's go back to Kennedy. Everyone knows Kennedy of the, I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and leaving him there to die, rather returning him safely to the earth. But in conversation, his voice is actually quite a bit lower. It was more down here. So it's closer to a Teddy, actually. So if you were to do a scene from, for example, something about the Cuban Missile Crisis, where he's talking with Dean Rusk and Bobby, and his voice is more here. People might not even recognize it.
So that's a sound alike?
Yes, that's where. Well, in fact, I did actually play Kennedy on a movie called The Express. I didn't get a credit for it though. They credited the guy whose body was in there. Anyway, but I had to check and see if I'm getting residuals for that. I got to call SAG. I did something on 2012 as well, where there was an actor who wasn't
movie 2012.
The movie, yes, who wasn't available, and so they said, come down here right now. Can you do this guy? And I said, I'll give it a shot. And his voice print was similar enough to mine that I could drop it in, so it wasn't really obvious. It helped that part of his speech was broadcast over a loudspeaker, so the echo kind of masked any
Right.
differences in the voice quality. But that's what it sounded like.
Whose voice were you?
Oh, I don't remember the name of the guy.
Oh, it's just the actor.
Yeah.
It's like
Canadian actor.
body double kind of.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a vocal body double. If there's something, a bit of dialogue that they weren't able to I still get tiny residual checks for Tequila Sunrise because Arliss Howard, who's now on, what's that show just before Mad Men? On AMC. Rubicon.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, I like that show.
But he had one line just to Raul Julia, I guess it was. Hey, okay, man, whatever. It was something like that, something really innocuous like that. And he was in New York or something and couldn't do it. And, I still get tiny bits of money from that every once in a while when that runs on cable.
How do you prepare for something like that?
Well, hopefully if they'll give you some source material or you just find it yourself, which is a lot easier now with YouTube, obviously. And you record yourself doing what you just heard and keep going back and going back and going back until it gets closer and closer and closer until it's as close a voice match as you can manage.
Wow.
I auditioned for another role in 2012 where you have Arnold Schwarzenegger speaking. But of course, they don't want the full-on impersonation and things of this nature. Maria, go get me my steroids and these kinds of things. That's too over the top.
Right.
So I don't think I got that one, but it was a lot more subtle. So you didn't have to do the accent quite so strong and it was sort of a calming sort of speech, like everything's under control, so you had to do, and so it's actually a much trickier thing to do than an impression. It's like trying to do a photographic replica of someone in a drawing as opposed to a caricature.
And what kind of feedback have you had from the actual people?
Oh, actually, I did get feedback.
Right.
So get it.
Got that. Right. Boom.
Years ago in the 80s, before I even started getting into voiceover, I was doing people's answering machine messages. The guy in Santa Monica had a company where they'd actually
Was that how you were like earning your waiting tables
yeah,
and doing voiceover?
Yeah. Well, I was actually a tour guide at Universal Studios. I was doing that for a long time. Just had a reunion the other night, in fact. But we did one where this is the law, the over the top sly, and we got a call recording on the guy's answer machine from the actual Sly Stallone.
Wow. And did he know it was supposed to be him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he was working on Rhinestone at the time. Apparently somebody knew Dolly Parton, so they got to her. And you can hear her giggling in the background. And the guy was named Ron, who ran the company. He said, "Hey, Ron, are you doing an impersonation of me? I think we should sell this in the ring. You bring the boxing gloves, I'll bring Adrian. You know what I mean?" He was imitating me, imitating him.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I have that on cassette somewhere.
Wow, were you scared? Did you think he was going to?
No.
Did you start drinking like raw eggs in case you ran into him?
Yeah, that's a very dangerous proposition nowadays.
And I guess maybe this could be the last thing that I want to know for now, because my constraint is that I'm starving and I got
blood sugar's getting a little low.
Yeah, I didn't think about this. This is like occupational. We don't have commercial breaks.
Right.
But your Obama has evolved.
He's hard to do. He's really hard because he's got he has some of that Chicago, the flat A.
He does. I've never noticed that.
When he has certain cadence, which is reminiscent of David Brinkley. So it's hard not to slip into David Brinkley.
Do you?
Good night, David. Good night, Jet. So.
Do you not listen to Fred Armisen?
And Fred nails him sometimes, and other times is not very close. And that's the thing with Obama, because he has different modes, different modalities.
It's because he's obviously the Manchurian Candidate.
Well, and he also knows his audience. I mean,
definitely.
He goes into black preacher mode when it
Can
when
you
it
do
suits
that?
him.
Do you have the Obama black preacher mode?
I really need to work on that.
Can you do Obama and Hillary doing their respective black preacher modes?
Yes, that's right. She started to do that too. But when he's talking to Jon Stewart, he's very matter of fact, and but there's that cadence, which but it's very hard to nail the voice for me.
So I guess my last final wish would be, I know people sometimes call up and make requests. Can you do like Obama and Clinton, like checking out the talent?
Oh boy. Chris liked that.
Yeah, or like
Oh, well, Bill is always very fun to do when you're talking about that incident, which shall not speak its name. Well, she couldn't speak her name at the time. I think you know why. but Bill, I think that's highly inappropriate. And just having this conversation with you makes me think Michelle's going to kick my ass.
Michelle she doesn't have a frying pan either.
No, she doesn't. It's true. No, she's got guns. Yeah, she's fierce.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was going to say, we were talking earlier about making fun of liberals. I did have one bit that I did during the campaign where a lot of Democrats are going to stay home if Hillary didn't get in. It was Hillary or nothing. And so I'm just not going to vote. So I invented the character Kyle.
Oh, Kyle, that's
Remember
right.
that? Yeah, the Kyle's.
No, I'm not going to vote today. I'll get everything I want. I don't just sit here and turn blue, hold my breath and stomp till I get,
And what would Hillary say to Kyle?
Man up! She has that Chicago thing too. Yeah.
She has the what did you guys call the weaponized flat A?
The weaponized flat A. That's right.
See, I'm like the total geek. I'm the whatever, the ultimate Stephanie Miller Show geek. And this has been, you've made my my dreams come true. And so
you make my dreams
thank you.
come true.
But thank you so much, Jim Ward, for coming to this undisclosed location in Los Feliz, California, for episode 2 of the show that's temporarily going to be called either torpedofish.com or No Stupid Questions, or you decide. I don't know, but thanks very much. And
have people call in their ideas for the title for the show.
And have a safe trip to Washington.
Well, thank you.
All right.